Welcome to MSS Great channel. In this video, I'm going to walk through about how to create an animation using just the CSS within the SharePoint framework. And again, this is the next level of animation from the previous video. The previous video is more of animation using the animate.css, and this one is more of animating when you mouse over some of the elements within the HTML. And in this sample or in this demo video, I am going to use one of the popular CSS based hover animation. This is kind of a very old one, but still worth to try it out. I use it a lot in some of my projects, and many of them liked it very much. It has almost 20 effects to choose from, and also based on the shape of the HTML tag or the shape of the object, you can animate based on the mouse over. And this is completely on the mouse over animation, and it is purely CSS based. So let's start creating the sample. So as usual, I am starting with the yo command. The project name would be the iHover, which is the library name or the CSS, and the web part name is already here, and I'm using this default setup. Let me enter. This would get the latest yo command. I'm setting it to no. That's all. When it is, while the project is creating, let me go through the iHover. So iHover is a CSS 3 kind of based hover effect pack. You can get it from this URL. Later I would put it in the description of my video. You can navigate through that as well. There is a demo sample for all the 20 effects. You can just go through any of the effect and then just play around. They have several samples which works along with the Bootstrap, and they have it for even square as well as the circle. There are pretty much cool effects which you can use. I use it a lot. You can open, close from all angle. Okay, so this is how the library is built in, and you can get the library directly from the GitHub. If you go to the GitHub here, it doesn't have the npm command to load. So what I did is I used directly the CSS. You can get the CSS from either the minified CSS or the original CSS. Just download the CSS and upload it into your SharePoint. So what I did is I uploaded into one of the document library, site asserts, the CSS folder. Under the site asserts library, I created a CSS folder and just uploaded both the CSS. That's it. So this is the initial step to start with. Let me see whether it has completed. It is still running on. The project creation is completed. Let me go to the project folder. I'm opening the Visual Studio Code. So this is the Visual Studio Code. By default, it has created all the project. Okay, in the project, I'm going to open the package.json file. So for the sample which I'm going through, you can just use the CSS you want to play around. If you want to use along with any of the SharePoint list, then you'll have to have some of the components installed. So first step, I will go through how to load the CSS and make use of it just by the sample HTML. Then next step would be connecting to the SharePoint list and loading the items and apply the CSS. Okay, so the first step is that what I do is I'll just go to the main TS file, which is the TypeScript file of the web part. So in the main script, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to import the component loader, which is for the SharePoint CSS loader component. So this is the one. Import the SP component loader. This is used to load the CSS or the JavaScript file dynamically when you do on init or in the constructor. In some places they use it the constructor, in sometime they use it in on init. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use it within on init method so that I can call the CSS. So what I do is on init, and the syntax would be I need to return. So make sure you return super dot on init method always. So within that you need to call whatever the method you want to. So in my case I loaded the CSS into the site assets folder, I mean the site assets library within. So this is the path I have loaded my CSS into my SharePoint. So I'm going to load it dynamically using this. To make sure the sample is working, I just go back to the hover sample. Let me take the simple sample, which is the first one, the demo circle. When you just mouse over, the color is going to in a circle. So I just copy this. Maybe I'll just copy this one. I have not included the Bootstrap, so it might not work the way you want it. So I just copy this, and you need to go back to the code, remove this HTML, and copy the HTML from the hover. Okay, and remember they're using some other image links, so make sure you change that image. So for example, in my case I'm going to my own SharePoint. I have some image to load. I just go to the assets. I have some images which maybe I'll use this wizard2 image. Usually I use the copy link, which is easier. So go back to your code and just change the image URL. Maybe it is an absolute path. Okay, so now what it does is it's just a sample of HTML, very plain sample. I'm just loading the CSS using the SP component loader. That's it. There is no dependency, nothing is added, no package, nothing is added. Okay, so now I just use the gulp serve. Always use the no browser because that's much easier. Meanwhile it is compiling. I'll open the workbench. Oops. Okay, this is the workbench. Let me check whether it has completed. Yeah, it has completed and is reloading. Now I should be able to see hover CSS. Okay, so you can see now the component is loaded. When you mouse over it, it turns around. So which confirms that CSS is loaded and the HTML is working. So now the basic of the CSS animation is done, or it is loaded. Now the main important thing we want to do is that we need to apply the CSS in the original sample or in our original code. That is the objective. So for now what we do is I have an organisms list. This is my favorite list which has all the columns. So I am going to use the PNP.js to load or to get the item from this list and display it in a kind of hover format or in a circle format in the animals. So similar to the one which you see in the initial PowerPoint. Okay, let me show the PowerPoint in case if you want to see. Okay, so now I am going to use my PNP.js, go to the list, get the item, load the item using this format. So when you mouse over a tiger, I want to show the name as tiger and the scientific name at the bottom. So that's the objective now. Let's go. So for that, we should install the dependency or the dependency packages. Let me stop this. So go to the package.json again, and you have to copy the dependency packages right from there so that it makes easier one step to copy all. So in my case, I need the PNP.js, Bootstrap, and the Jquery. So Jquery is to program, Bootstrap is for the UI, and PNP.js is for getting the items. And I need the JavaScript types and the Bootstrap types. Okay, let me do that. Okay, so you just add it into the package.json and just call npm install. So what this install does is it will go to the dependency file and just install all these which have mentioned in the package. Okay, so meanwhile when it is running, we can even we need to add the configuration for Jquery and Bootstrap into the config.json file as well. So let it finish installing the package. Then later I will copy into the config.json file. So it had finished installing all the package. Go to the config.json file, add the Jquery and the Bootstrap. So now the dependency has been added. Go back to the main webpart.ts file, which is the TypeScript file, and then you need to import your Jquery and the Bootstrap. So for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to use require Bootstrap for the Bootstrap. Let me use require Bootstrap, and for the Jquery I just use import. So the import method will be the one for Jquery. Okay, so now the Jquery and the Bootstrap is configured. These are the steps you to do. So now I'm going to program for PNP.js to get the item from the list. So for that you need to initialize the PNP.js. Initializing the PNP.js, you need to first import the PNP, which is the SP object from the PNP. So once you import it, you need to initialize the context of the SP object so that your SharePoint context is being applied there. So I'm just going to call the SP setup. This is the pretty much basic step in all PNP setup. So now the PNP is ready. It has been imported and then the context is set. So to get the item, I always use a separate class or a module inside the TS file so that it's easy for you to play around. So always it's animals html.ts. That's my favorite kind of. I'm using it for every sample. So inside that I'm going to program to add PNP code to get the details from. Okay, to start with, I'm importing the PNP.js, which is the SP object, and I'm declaring the types for getting the value from the list. Basically, there's an interface iOrganism which would take all the columns, and if you see, the taxonomy column is again another interface, and the picture column is a hyperlink. So hyperlink are the picture column, so it needs another interface. And I'm going to add one more class. I'm going to add the class which is the organism class. Organism class is the one which would have the method to implement the PNP.js. So in that I'm going to first have the template of the HTML file. So the template would have the header and the details of the animal taxonomy. Okay, maybe I'll remove this. This is too much. Okay, so this is just a simple HTML header which just says that animal taxonomy with the header tag, and there is a placeholder for animal card. The Jquery will inject code inside here, inside this ID. It will find the ID and inject at runtime. Okay, So then I need to create a function to get the values out from the list using the PNP.js. That is a standard function which is called the get list data, which is like iOrganism. Organisms is the list name, and I'm getting all the column. So and then returning the response. So the response is the JSON, and I'm typecasting it to iOrganism array. Basically, I'm going to get the array, so it is just typecasted to array. And we need another function to initialize it and then get all the organism response. So let me add those two methods as well. Okay, I added two more methods. The first method is the initialize controls method. Usually I use this method to initialize the jQuery or whatever. So right now it just called to the another method which is get all organism. Get all organism is the method which will in turn call the get list data and return the value. And further, when the value is written, you can do whatever the activity you want to do. So the activity will be done here, like rendering the HTML. So these two functions are there. Now we need one last function, which is the render function, to render the HTML which is returned from this list. So the render function will be like a HTML formation. So this is the render method which I have implemented. Basically it takes the array of the iOrganism and then just loop through and form this HTML for each animal. So basically this is the template for each animal. Each animal is a column, bootstrap column with the div tag, which is the template from the iHover. It's a circle, colored one, effect one, and left to right. These are the most important class names to have the animation effect. And at the back side of the iHover or the div tag, you have the name and the scientific name, and the first one will be the picture. Front facing will be the picture and the back facing will be the animal name and the scientific name. That's it. Okay, this is the template for every animal. I just iterate and form this HTML and just return it. That's it. And it will be like in a row. So I have one row with all the columns of animals. That's it. So finally I need to call this within my get all organisms, which means that I'll just say class dot underscore render, and I need to pass the response. That's it. Okay, so now what it does is whenever it loads, it will load, and I need to implement this in the main template or the web part. Import, I'm not going to name that as org. Let me implement in org HTML. Import I need to import the class name, or what I do is I'm importing everything. So maybe then in that case it is HTML or HTML from dot slash is the web part. Oops, no, it is from dot slash animals HTML. That's it. Okay, so I'm importing and then naming it as arc HTML. This arc HTML now has all the methods to call them to initialize. I need to call this in the render method. So the render method, usually what I do is I would usually use it to change this HTML, because we already have the template, so you don't need this template anymore. Just say org HTML dot template. That's it. And you need to call the get all organisms or initialize controls. That's it. Okay, so this initialize controls will in turn call the get organisms and it should load. So now all the wire up and everything is done. So hopefully it should work. Now I'm going to run the gulp serve again. Okay, gulp serve again, make sure that all the files are saved. Okay, it has been loaded. Let me refresh. Something went wrong. What is that? Some dependency it is not loaded. Original failed to load the dependency path Bootstrap. Okay, so I think the Bootstrap component is not loaded, so it is looking for some dependency. Let me check whether it has any dependencies which has all been loaded. This is the file we have implemented correctly in config.json. Bootstrap is there, and Jquery is also there. Bootstrap. So okay, so the problem is Bootstrap depends on the Jquery, but the Jquery is not used anywhere. So that's why the Jquery component is not loaded. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trigger out Jquery load by calling any of the Jquery method. Then the Bootstrap will make use of it. Let me make use of the document load. Okay, so now what I did is I just added the document ready. This will make sure that the Jquery is loaded and the Bootstrap gets loaded in turn. Then the things should go as normal. Okay, the build process is done. Let me refresh this. Hopefully it works. Oh, yes. So if you see here, I'm using the column format for the Bootstrap. Let me show you the okay. So this is for each animal. Each animal, it's a column of 4. It's a grid size. So, and there is a margin of 10, and this is a circle plus the name, and this one for each animal template. It has been loaded in this format. That's it. So now if I mouse over, effect 1 will take effect. So the effect 1 will be there and it is working. And if you want to change the effect, maybe I want to have over 10. What is this? 10. I was seeing some more effect, which is okay, the opening effect. So if I want to have this opening effect with colored, for example, so the opening effect colored, effect 18 bottom to top. Okay, so I need just copy this effect 18 bottom to top. I just go to the code and effect 18, change it to effect 18 bottom to top. That's it. So it should work now. Just save it. It will auto build, and once the build process is completed, then we can refresh to see whether effect 18, the same effect is being affected in all the animal. Build is done. Refresh the page. So once you refresh, animals are all loaded. Okay, this is the effect. So to change the effect, you can just change the HTML or the CSS name. Then it will automatically be applied into your code. But the next step is that I want to customize that. I want to make that code outside of your SPFx code, which means that I want to put it that as a property pane customization, so that it's easy for you to change the animation, or whenever someone drag and drop or add the web part through the property panel or the controls, they can just change the values. So now I'm going to start program by adding a property panel control. Okay, let me stop this. To start with property panel control, you need to first import the controls you want to implement. So in my case, let me import everything irrespective of whatever I'm using in. In the original production scenarios, maybe you want to avoid importing everything. You just import whatever, whichever the control you needed. That's it. Okay, in this scenario I'm just importing everything. So first step is to import. The second step is to add all the variables which holds the property. So what I am going to do is that I'm going to have a custom property or the property panel for changing the shape from circle to square, square to circle. So that is the shape change. And the effect, if you go back to here, so I'm going to have one property to change the shape, which is the circle or the square, and second property to change the effect. There are 20 effects for circle and some for square. So to change this effect, and the color effect. So sometime you want to have just the black, or sometime you want to have this blue background. And if you change your CSS, then you can change it to some other color as well. And the hover, the last property which I want to do is kind of a hover position, which means that which effect, inside each effect there is a step to do, whether the effect has to come from the left and right, or top to bottom, or bottom to top. So these things I am going to make it configurable inside the web part, so that it's easy for the user to change at any time. Instead they come and touch the code inside. Okay, so I'm going to implement 4 properties. Remember, to implement those 4 property, you need 4 variables for that property. So just copy paste by executing code which has the 4 properties or the 4 variables. These are the variables which will hold all the 4 properties. Then next, go to the get property panel configuration and add the code to code for those 4 properties. Let me remove this and paste this one. Okay, this is a very simple property. If you can see here, page name I am adding as a hover animation, and the group name I hover options, because these are the I hover options. First one is the hover shape property, where you can change it to circle or the square. Key value is the circle and the square, and there is a drop down property which would have all the 20 effects. For now I am just putting into 20 effects. If they change it to square, this should change, which means that it is a dynamic property. I'm not getting too complex, I'm just making it simple. And the color effect, which I mentioned you, whether you want to have a colored class or none, just set it to none. And the position, which I told you, the animation effect, whether it is from left to right or right to left, top to bottom or bottom to top. There is again left and right, right and left, but that becomes more complex. Now I am just assuming only simple things. So the properties have been set, and the final step is that I always do set these property values inside the manifest, web part manifest. So if you go to the web part manifest.json file, the default property, which is the description, is there, is no longer used. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pass all the default property whenever when the first time web part is loaded. I need to set the default property, which is the circle, effect 1, there is no color, and the effect is always from left to right. Okay, this is, so it is all done. The property has been declared, set the initial value, control is done. So now I am going to use gulp serve no browser. Okay, let it build. Oops, the command is wrong, so it would fail. Okay, gulp serve no browser. So when it starts to run, maybe I go back here, wait for it to build. TypeScript version finished, so I'm just waiting for it to build. Build has been completed. Now I'm going to refresh. Okay, so the first effect it should have in the property effect. Okay, let me go to the properties. Okay, so it is not set by default. Probably when you need to drop the web part again. So this is already dropped, so it doesn't take the value. I'm going to change it to square. It should change. Let me play around for a while, then left to right. Okay, let me refresh now. Okay, so the properties. So now you can see all the properties on the right side. Whenever you change, there is no effect here. Okay, because you understand now, we have not set any of this property value inside our load method, which means that these properties are set and the variables are assigned, but those variables are not used anywhere inside your code. So that's why your control is still with the old one. So to do that, what you should do, I don't need to stop again. So maybe I'll go to animals.html. I need to pass the properties. Let me stop. That is better. Okay. So I need to pass this properties into the animals class first. All these properties I need to pass into animals class first. Then I can make use of those inside the animals HTML class. So for that, what I'm going to do is that I'm going to declare one property of type iProps. Let me copy this. Go back to our animals and then just say import from /webpart. Oops, why this one coming off? Webpart. Okay, from this webpart I'm importing this properties, and I'm going to declare another variable which is public. The variable would be, let me put it as, the variable name will always be props, so I'm just putting it as the props variable. So public static props of type I copied it already. So okay, so I'm declaring the variable, and in the main web part I need to pass this variable. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use html dot props is equal to, all the properties will be in this dot properties. Okay, just pass this value. So now all the properties are passing it from main HTML to this module or the class. So what I should do is now I need to make use of this properties into your load. So basically in the render method maybe. Then I can just implement that. So what I'm going to do in that, in the render method, I'm going to declare some variable which is here. Let me start from here. I'm declaring 4 variables for each property, again a local variable, and I'm going to change all these into a variable. So what I do is I just implement those variables. Just copy and put it here. That's it. Okay, and now it should work. Hopefully. I'm saving it. Yeah, now I need to run the gulp serve again, and I need to wait for it to build. Build completed. So now if I refresh, these values have been saved, so this should affect. I'm refreshing it left to right. Let me go to the edit. So it is circle 4 effect, left to right or right to left, and then no color. See here, no color. There is no color. So if I change it to colored, it will be blue color. Sometime the animation, yeah, blue color. And I want to change this to square. It has been converted into square. Okay, and square 4 effect is different, so maybe I change it to 2. Okay, there is an effect here, but it looks a bit awkward for square. So what I'm going to do is just to make it pretty, because when you have 3 images for a square, it gets cramped. So what I do is inside my code, I'm just going to change slightly saying that if it is a square, then just use 2 column, so that it becomes much easier, much better. So what I'm doing is, by default it is 4 column. If it is square, then use 6 column, which is like it will just show 2 image. Then I need to make this also configurable, which this I'm changing it to the variable now, $column $. So now this becomes configurable by adding a variable to it. I save them. The build started. The build has completed. Now when I refresh the screen, you should see only 2 column. Yes. So for square, it takes only 2 column because I changed it to column 6. And now when I change it to circle, there will be 3 column. And you can change the color and other parameters as well. So this is how you manage the eye hover animation within your SPFx. Hope you like the video. Please subscribe, like, share if you find it really useful. Thank you.